Boxie, burp. I didn't hit the wrong button this time. I'm actually live and didn't screw things up. How great is that? Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case for November 2024. It is election day, so if you have voted, great. If you haven't voted, you might want to think about doing that. You probably ought to. And this may be a good distraction if you're concerned about the presidential election or any of the down ballot voting. This might be a good distraction for you. It's quite a time here in America for election season. Anyway, I'm Larry Harnisch, and again, this is Boxie. Boxie is the district attorney's files in the Black Dahlia. And you'll notice we have a guest today. We have Michael Connelly's novels. Yes, many of them. I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, what is all of this about Larry Harnisch? What is he doing? I do an Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case the first Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. Pacific time on Instagram and YouTube. I started doing that because I got fed up with the poor quality of what I call the true crime industrial complex. And I'm a lot happier not doing TV shows and podcasts. I mean, for more than 20 years, I talked to anybody with a microphone and a camera. I thought it was my obligation to try to set the record straight on the Black Dahlia case and about Elizabeth Short. And I eventually learned people don't want the record set straight. They want this hodgepodge of film noir tropes. I recently did an interview with Christopher Goffard of the Los Angeles Times. And, you know, to his credit, he did a pretty good job. And I got some positive feedback from that, which was nice. So, you know, I thought I should, since it's my former employer, and that kind of thing. But in general, I don't do interviews. I really don't, and I'm a lot happier not doing them. Anyway, this is only Dahlia stuff. I do another Ask Me Anything on George Hodel and Steve Hodel. That is the third Tuesday of the month. That will be November 19th. Also at 10 a.m. Pacific time on Instagram and YouTube. Okay. So now I usually get a troll. Sometimes I get a lot of them. So, you know, I will report them right away. I don't put up with that. And the way this works is I will talk for a while about a subject, and then I will open it up to questions. And I alternate between live questions in the chat and submitted questions. I have, as I've said before, I have a lot of submitted questions. I guarantee you I will not get to them all. I won't. I do want to say this is an Ask Me Anything, not Tell Me Anything. Okay? If you send me a submitted question, make it a question, not a statement. Okay? Thank you. Anyway, that's how it works. We'll go for an hour. The time will go quickly, I hope, and it'll be fun. The next Dahlia session will be December 3rd. Is that possible? December? Yeah. December 3rd, 10 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube and Instagram. Okay. First of all, report on the book. Where am I now? 160,000 words as of Friday. The book is, I envision the book in a couple of sections. The first part is the life of Elizabeth Short. That is essentially done. I have one chapter I have to go back and wrap up that deals with Virginia Short and Adrian West. I need to bring them into part one to talk about what they were doing while Elizabeth Short was moving all over the country, because it's quite different. So at the moment, I am on part two, which is the investigation. I finished the crime scene, and I am now talking about the morgue. And I have been studying the morgue photos in detail. They are not pleasant to look at by any stretch of the imagination, but I have been studying them. Fortunately, they're in black and white. And I will just say parenthetically to anybody who says, oh, yeah, this killing was just like this killing was just like that. No, no. When you look at everything that was done to Elizabeth Short when she's lying on the morgue table, there's nothing like it. There really is nothing like it. People will concentrate on one aspect of it, but there was so much done to this unfortunate young lady. Yeah, there's nothing like it. There really isn't. Okay. So that's where I am right now with the book. And that is kind of a segue into, this is going to be kind of different for me because I'm going to talk about writing rather than kind of the nuts and bolts of the Black Dahlia case. Usually this is the nuts and bolts of the Black Dahlia case. And this time I'm going to talk about writing and fiction versus nonfiction. Nonfiction is what I do. Fiction is what other people do. And before we go further, because I'm going to talk about Michael Connelly's The Waiting and his treatment of the Black Dahlia case. And if you haven't read the book yet, if you are a Michael Connelly fan, you don't want it spoiled, stop watching now, okay? Massive spoiler alert, massive, 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 okay? Because I'm really going to get into the weeds on what Mike says about the Black Dahlia case. So, final warning, if you don't want it spoiled, go away now, okay? You've been warned. All right. Now, why am I talking about Michael Connelly and The Waiting? Okay. Mike, and let me preface all of this, say, I know Mike. I don't know him well. I do know him. We're cordial. We worked together at the Los Angeles Times. Mike and I were both in the Valley edition of the Los Angeles Times before he went on to fame and fortune. And I have these Michael Connelly books out here to show I'm a Michael Connelly reader. Okay, I read the Bosch books. I am not a fan of Lincoln Lawyer. The ones where he's got the reporter character, those are all, yuck. I can't read those. And Lincoln Lawyer, I gave all of those away. I have Black Echo, which was his first one, somewhere. I had a copy. I had a copy of that. It's not in the pile. I don't know where it went. Maybe it was a paperback. Anyway, I say all of that because somebody's going to come along and say, "Oh, well, Larry Harnisch is just jealous of Michael Connelly and his success and all of that." No, not at all. I'm happy. I mean, look at that. That's great. I'm very happy for Mike. I'm very happy that he's a successful writer. He's doing all these novels. He's got these TV shows. I could never do that. I would never want to do that. Okay. I mean, when I was a young man in my 20s, and when earlier when I was in college, I took creative writing, and I did attempt some fiction when I was in my 20s. It wasn't very good, frankly. I probably would do better at it now. I'm certainly a better writer, I hope, than I was in my 20s. But fiction is not my thing. And I know that about myself. I am a nonfiction guy. And, it just doesn't appeal to me. And the reason, and that's why I want to get into this, the reason that I prefer nonfiction is that you don't get the depth of character, you don't get the depth of place, of time, unless the writer is extraordinarily gifted. I have found very few, if any, writers who can come close to all the richness and the depth of fact, of reality. You basically, it's basic. I won't say it's impossible, but it's a challenge. And to me, speaking as a nonfiction guy, because nonfiction is my thing, I think there's a spectrum. And I'm sure this has been said much better by others, kind of a spectrum of reality. At the far end, an author can make up time, place, characters, language. I guess if you get to the far end of that spectrum, maybe that's where you have science fiction and fantasy, where you are creating alternative worlds, alternative characters. Um, you know, the sky's the limit, presumably. And as you move on that spectrum toward reality, you do get a certain known quantity. If you want to set a, let's say, rather than make up your own world and your own characters and language and all that, let's say you want to pick a particular city, let's say Berlin, or let's say New York in the 1920s, or Chicago. Okay, that gives you a landscape to work with. But at the same time, you're limited. All of a sudden, it's like, well, if you're going to write about, let's say, New York in the 1920s, you need to know about New York in the 1920s, and you need to know about America in the 1920s, unless you're going to make, it's sort of this alternative view of, well, things are sort of like this and sort of like that, which I guess would be kind of like the treatment of Superman and Batman, where it's Metropolis, but you know where it is, and it's sort of in this, the 50s or something like that. So, and I hope you can see where I'm going with this, is when you write a book like The Waiting, okay, which is set in a particular city, which is Los Angeles, and you're dealing with a particular agency, which is the Los Angeles Police Department. You get a certain richness. You're writing about the LAPD, you're writing about Los Angeles, but people expect you to know the freeways. People expect you to know Wilshire Boulevard or Sunset or where the beaches are. You're expected to know like the basic stuff. And there are certain writers about Los Angeles who just don't give a damn. And that would be James Ellroy. James Ellroy will write about historic Los Angeles. And my God, the man has no idea at all how local government works and doesn't care. I mean, it's like, wow, this is not how local, because, and I will tell you, if you don't live in Los Angeles, or if you don't live in the US, Los Angeles is a complicated city and county. People think it's just the city of Los Angeles, and you have all these municipalities and all this other stuff. Local government, and I should know because we covered it, is extremely complicated. And Ellroy doesn't care. He will, make up stuff. It's like, no, local government does not work like that at all. But Ellroy is a writer who can get away with it. And he's even said, okay, look, if you write a letter to me that say on, page 120 of such and such a book, this particular gun is a 45 instead of a 38, fuck you, I don't care. I don't give a shit about that. And that's how he is, but that's Ellroy. He can get away with it. And the anachronisms have kind of crept into his later books in not good ways. So in that respect, Ellroy is kind of the exception. Mike is a reporter, and that's his background. And he is famous for researching Los Angeles, so he gets the descriptions correct and all that kind of thing. When things happened, he's kind of scrupulous about that. So, which brings us to The Waiting. And again, what Mike has done is he has used the Black Dahlia case as a plot element. And of course, one of his characters has to, and spoiler, one of his characters has to solve the Black Dahlia case, only what presents itself as the Black Dahlia case has almost no, other than the name, no similarity to the Black Dahlia case at all. And, for somebody who is using a particular time and a particular place, and in this instance, a particular crime, the Black Dahlia, and a particular victim, Elizabeth Short, and particular investigators, and then to just make up everything is a little odd. And then Mike has given some interviews where he says, it's just a novel, relax, folks. And it's like, no, if you're going to call something the Black Dahlia and use the victim's name, you don't get to retreat behind, oh, it's just a novel. You don't get to do that. I'm sorry. That's, if you want to do that. And here's kind of the takeaway ahead of time. Mike is better than this. And that's one of the reasons I'm going on about this is not just, oh, well, he got the Black Dahlia case wrong. It's like, no, Mike's a better writer than this. I know he is. I have read these books. This is really second-rate work. And I have to wonder about some of the writing because the dialogue is, it hits full, it doesn't sound right. And some of the details are just like, oh, come on, Mike, you know better than that. So it's kind of, I'm coming from a point of not, oh, he got it wrong, but it's kind of disappointment. It's like, Mike, you need to tighten up your game. I know Mike can do better. And I will say right now, Mike's a busy guy. He writes a minimum of one novel a year, plus the TV shows. That's a lot. I think maybe he's stretched pretty thin. So anyway, but he has decided to bring the Black Dahlia case into the waiting. Now, how does he do that? Well, Mike has a formula. And if you have read a bunch of Mike Connelly books, you will know Mike has a formula. It's very obvious. He has his A plot, his A theme, and that goes along like that. And then he has his transitional material, and then he has his B theme. Okay? So you've got main theme, transition, B theme, transition, A theme, back and forth, back and forth. And sometimes the two plots, the main theme and the secondary theme, sometimes they go together. They meet at the end. He ties it up. And other times they don't. But that is generally his formula. And so the main theme in The Waiting, now I haven't read all of this. I read the first 7 chapters online. There's 0 about the Black Dahlia case. It's all about Renee Ballard. The Black Dahlia doesn't enter until, what is it, page 140, something like that. Okay, 141. So the Black Dahlia case is the secondary plot, and the secondary plot involves Maddie Bosch. And Mike said in an interview, okay, the Black Dahlia was came last, which tells me, yeah, maybe it was kind of an afterthought, because it seems a little half-baked. It seems a little hasty. But anyway, the setup is this. Harry Bosch, as all the Harry Bosch fans knows, he has a daughter, Maddie. And Maddie's on the LAPD, and the setup is that she's getting loaned to the cold case unit, working with Renee Ballard. And she's interested in old cases, okay. And so she's going, yeah, goodbye. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Let's see, where was it? Oh, yes. So Renee Maddie Bosch is interested in the cold case unit, and she's going through old cases in robbery homicide. And she gets the key to the file cabinet where the Black Dahlia files are kept. And Renee Ballard, who is based on Mitzi Roberts, an advisor on the Bosch TV shows, and also a retired cold case detective who was assigned to the Black Dahlia case. Renee Ballard says, okay, well, the Black Dahlia file cabinet is here. Here's the key, but it's locked up because all the files are missing, and also the evidence is missing. Okay, no, and that was the beginning of my less than happy reception of Mike's treatment of the Black Dahlia case, because no. Now I will preface this by saying I have never been in the police administration building. I haven't. I do know, and I can speak from personal experience about Parker Center, which is where robbery homicide used to be. And I saw the Black Dahlia file cabinet. Brian Carr, who was assigned to the Black Dahlia case at the time, opened the file cabinet for me. And I will tell you now, it's jam-packed with stuff. It isn't like, oh, it's just empty air. Oh, no, no, no. And we have other evidence of this in terms of the LAPD every so often will put some of the material on display. There was an exhibit at the Police Museum in 2012, back when James Ellroy was still talking about the Black Dahlia case. And quite a bit of material from the Dahlia investigation was put on display. There were photographs of her. There was a letter, like a transcription of an interview. There was some kind of the stuff that had already been out, had already been released to the public. That was put on display. Fingerprint cards, a fake newspaper from the Who is the Black Dahlia TV movie, that sort of thing. So it's not all missing, and it's really, it really feeds into my larger complaint about it is that it feeds into the whole notion that the LAPD bungled the Black Dahlia case, which it did not. It did not. It was a state-of-the-art investigation for 1947. Anyway, that's kind of the beginning of it. And there's very little of Elizabeth Short in the waiting. It's mostly Elizabeth Short kind of she's just fuel to keep the story going. There isn't anything else. And in fact, what Mike does is he smushes the Black Dahlia case together with Harvey Glattman. It turns out that the killer is his photographer. And the long story short, Matty Bosch discovers that there is a storage locker, and this guy there is a long abandoned shipping container that a professional photographer had used. And when they go in there, they find all this photo equipment, and it's a photo lab. And so Matty Bosch goes through the files, and she finds picture, a folder labeled Betty, where Elizabeth Short is in a bra and panties, and she's all tied up. Okay, that's not Elizabeth Short at all. That's Harvey Glattman. Okay, Harvey Glattman was I think he was an appliance repairman who was passing himself off as a professional photographer. And this was in the days when the detective magazines and whatnot generally featured a frightened woman all tied up on the cover or inside something like that. That was generally the drill. And so he would do that. He would hire these women as models and then kill them. He would strangle them. And he got caught about his third victim. His third victim either, got away from him, or I think she kicked his ass. If I remember correctly, she kicked his ass. I think that's what happened again. But anyway, it's odd that he would call it the Black Dahlia and then make up all this stuff. So what happened? The upshot is that they go into this photo lab, and again, I have to wonder about just some of the, frankly, who wrote this, because the Waiting describes this guy's shipping container as being a photo lab. Okay, what's missing? You know, they describe the files and the equipment and all that stuff. There's no rainwater. And if you're going to have a photo lab, the first thing you need is running water. So no, it's like, who wrote this? Anyway, there's a lot of backtracking where they go to a house in Angelino Heights. They find, miracle of miracles, a house with a full basement. Like, and he says, you know, yeah, it's rare for a house to have a full basement. And there's a floor drain where this guy was tying up women in the basement and taking pictures of them and then killing them. And I mean, for the amount of that Elizabeth Short and the Black Dahlia is actually in there is minimal. And a writer like Mike, because Mike is a good writer, he could have fixed this in 5 minutes. Instead of calling it the Black Dahlia, he could have called it, I don't know, we'll say the Purple Petunia. He could have called it the Purple Petunia. He could have done 2 pages in on backstory of who the Purple Petunia was, and then everything would have been fine. He could have done that, and then he could have gone on his happy way. And of course, the resolution is naturally you're going to have a forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown ending, where Maddie has solved the Black Dahlia case because she hoped to make her career on the Black Dahlia, and then turns around and you know, it's like, well, no, the DA won't sign off on it. So is it solved? But it's not solved. Blah, blah, blah. And no. And as I said, Mike could have fixed that in 5 minutes. I know he is. He's a good enough writer that he could have done that. Why he decided to, you know, he decided, well, you know, it was time to deal with the Black Dahlia case. And it's like, no. So long story short, you know, it's a disappointment for a number of reasons. I think if you're going to have the LAPD solve the Black Dahlia case, you need to at least incorporate some of the details of the actual case rather than just the name and the nickname and make up a bunch of stuff. And I would fault Mike for that. And again, it's the dialogue doesn't ring true. I mean, Mike is usually a lot better than this. And so I will leave it at that. I was disappointed. I know Mike can do better. I've read his other books. And and on a final note, I will just point out, I have spent 20 plus years. I'm in my 70s now. I have spent years trying to get into the head of a 22-year-old woman living in the 1940s. It's a challenge. And I will just say that there's maybe one writer in 1,000, male writer, who can get into the head of a woman and really portray that character at all accurately. I would advise the average male writers, like, don't try that. Don't try to get into the persona of a female character. You can't do it. And I think that's one of the other problems in kind of the treatment of the Black Dahlia case, in that it was a female victim. So I will leave it at that. It's a disappointment. Mike could do better. I think maybe he's stretching himself kind of thin. And I will leave it at that. I was going to go on about David Lynch and his story about the nighttime photograph of the Black Dahlia and how it's utter crap. I got a lot of guff on social media over saying, oh no, David Lynch is lying. People don't want to believe that. But let's go to the questions here. I see there's a lot of them. Let's go into let me go to Instagram and scroll back if I can. Was there ever a latent fingerprint found on the first letter from the Dahlia killer despite the gasoline? Yes, there was. The question is this. The question is about the envelope that was sent to the Los Angeles newspapers containing the material from Elizabeth Short's purse, which is, as far as the original detectives were concerned, that was the only letter that was legitimate. All the others were the work of pranksters. You have to remember, first of all, yes, they did know about fingerprints, but that had gone through the postal system. There is no telling how many people had handled that envelope. So what they did do was because it was addressed with cutout letters from the newspaper, they took it apart and they found, I think, single fingerprints on the back of some of the newspaper, maybe. What Harry Hansen said in the grand jury testimony is that it was mostly smears and blurs. So, yeah, they thought they found something. How sharp it is, how accurate it is, certainly, the ability to process single fingerprints in 1947 was non-existent. AFIS and stuff like that didn't come along for a lot later. So were there fingerprints? Yeah, probably. Were they able to do anything with them? And I don't think so. And I will leave it at that. Okay, let's go back. Let me scroll way back here to, let's see. What was the name of the cafe where they found Elizabeth Short's shoes and purse? It was on Crenshaw. I don't remember the name of it. I have the address of it in my notes somewhere. I will point out that Red Manley was sure it was her purse and shoes. They also did a lineup for the French family, Elvira and is it Dorothy French? I'm trying to remember I think it was Dorothy French. Anyway, they said it's not her purse, it's not her shoes. So, wasn't it? It's a little vague there as to whether it was really hers. Is it possible the actual killer wait a minute. Go away. Is it possible that the actual killer discarded Short's belongings only to be found by some sicko writer? Yeah, we don't know. We absolutely don't know what happened to her stuff. We don't know her clothes. All she had was her clothes. Oh, and I should jump back to the waiting, because along with them saying all the evidence is missing, they also say the reports are missing, which they're not. That police officers through the years have rifled. You don't just waltz into robbery homicide and rifle through the Black Dahlia file cabinet. That's not how it works. I was in, unless it's changed once they got to the police administration building, but that's not how it was at Parker Center, because I was there. I saw that. That's not how it works. But Mike says, oh, well, there's a suitcase of Elizabeth Short's, and, they go through all this DNA, blah, 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 that I'm not going to bother with. But no, the suitcases are not there. Elizabeth Short's suitcases were returned to the family. So that's not there. And, when Mike talks about, well, all the evidence is missing. Well, there isn't any, I mean, there was no, that was the problem, is Elizabeth Short was found naked, no jewelry, no nothing. They had just this little envelope of stuff, and that's all. And I forgot to mention, back to the Connelly thing. I mentioned Mitzi Roberts, okay, who was assigned to the Black Dahlia case and is now a technical advisor on, Mike's TV shows. Mike says, well, I had Mitzi Roberts to, rely on because she took the calls on the Black Dahlia case. Okay. I talked to Mitzi Roberts, and I don't want to dump on her, and I don't want to dump on Mike, but I will tell you this. Mitzi Roberts told me that she was under orders not to spend any time on the Black Dahlia case, because as far as her superiors were concerned, it took her time away from active cases that she should be working on. So, she might have taken an occasional call. I don't think I've ever seen an interview with Mitzi Roberts about the Black Dahlia case. And I know, because when Brian Carr retired, he was the previous Black Dahlia detective assigned to the case. He said, whoever comes along is not going to know it as well as I do, because they don't have the time to devote to it. Brian kind of had to push back against Steve Hodel. And so I have to wonder, and I was going to say this before, I have to wonder whether the LAPD is sort of putting out this story, this cover story that, oh, the Black Dahlia files are all missing, so that nobody will file a Freedom of Information Act report, or request, rather. I have to wonder whether they're doing that, because anyway, that's what Mitzi Roberts told me, is that she was under orders not to spend any time on the Dahlia case and not to talk about it, not to do interviews on it, blah, blah, blah. So it's a little insincere to say, oh yeah, she was the LAPD's point person on the Black Dahlia case when she was under orders not to spend any time on it. Okay, let's see here. I have got so many questions. I got to talk fast here. Okay. Have you ever located the article about Matt Gordon that Elizabeth Short was carrying in her purse? Yeah, kind of. I think it's from if I remember correctly, it's from the Pueblo, Colorado chieftain. And if you zoom in on a photograph of the material that was sent to the newspapers and stuff from the killer, you can read the article. There's a guy named Kyle Wood, rather. There was a guy named Kyle Wood, and I think he actually found the article and sent me a copy. There are a lot of old newspapers that are online now. I don't think that's one of them. There are a few that aren't. One of the San Diego papers is not online, and I think it's one of the Colorado papers that aren't online. But Kyle Wood did send me a copy of that, and I did, kind of make it out and type. So I have a copy. And the story with that is that Elizabeth Short would say there was a mistake in it. There was a mistake in it, but it's not what people said. Oh, it was about her, she was going to marry this guy, blah, blah, blah. They misspelled the name of her hometown, Medford. They spelled it Bedford. And so there was a mistake in it. But that's the extent of it. Okay, let's go back to Instagram here. Any more questions from Instagram? No. Okay, good. All righty. Let's see. Do you know why Matt Gordon committed suicide? Yeah, I do. Matt Gordon was in a terrible plane crash, and he just smashed his face. He went out to. What happened was a pilot went down, and he had already rescued. These guys were fighting the Japanese, and they were flying P-51s, and another pilot had crashed, and so Matt Gordon took out it was a small aircraft, something like a Cessna or a Piper, something like that. I think it was called an L5, slightly different. It was the military version. But anyway, he goes out in that thing and he picks up this guy who's been shot down, and he brings them back, and everything's fine. And then another pilot had been shot down, and he went out to rescue him, and it was dark, and he crashed the plane, and he just smashed the hell out of his face. And when you look at the photographs of him after the crash, it looks like somebody took his nose like this and just twisted the whole center of his face. I mean, his face went into the controls, and he just mashed his features significantly. So he was hospitalized for a long time and fairly disfigured. And so he was worried about going back to the United States with his face all smashed up. And so that was a contributing factor for sure. Let's see. Was her hair color red when she left the Biltmore? It had been hennaed, but growing out, I think, was what they said in the medical examiner said was it was hennaed and growing out. Okay. Let's see. Would news agencies work with police? Would the examiner tell police about leads in exchange for articles about certain other cases? That kind of depends. The newspapers and the police in the 1940s were much more cooperative and much friendlier than they are now, for sure. That all changed gradually through the 1940s and into the 1950s. But yeah, I mean, at one time there were no public information officers. If you wanted to know something that was going on, you'd go up to Sergeant so and so or Detective so and ask them what's going on, and they would probably tell you. It was like that. So I think there was a certain amount of trading of information back and forth. But the way it works, if you're a reporter and you're working with an agency like that, it's kind of like playing poker, where I know this and you know that, and we'll kind of feel each other out on who knows what. It's like that, and it's I think there was some back and forth assistance. Certainly not like now, not at all like now. Okay. Let's see. Who is it that the detective was referring to when he said he was convinced he spoke to the killer? I think this is the Ralph Asdell question. I interviewed Ralph Asdell, who was loaned to the investigation. And Ralph identified a suspect who was working, I think, at a restaurant nearby. There were a lot of restaurants on Crenshaw at this time, in this time period. And he thought he had identified a guy, and the car had just been painted. And Ralph did what he was supposed to do, which is he passed the tip along to Harry Hansen and Finest Brown, and it didn't go anywhere. And he said, "Well, I got fed up with the investigation at that point and asked to go back to my home division," and that's what happened. So that's the Ralph Asdell story. I found Ralph. Ralph had never been interviewed. Great guy. He had never been interviewed. I tracked him down from being in one of the stories, and I'm proud to say I was a pallbearer at his funeral. So that is the Ralph Asdell question. What was Robert Manley's alibi for the whole period Elizabeth was missing? Because he had an alibi for the day she was last seen. I think Manley was in San Francisco at some point. He was a salesman. He was up making sales calls. They don't know where. And this actually feeds into another question about Elizabeth Short's lost week. Is there really a lost week? Yes, there is. Now, retired homicide detective Steve Hodel will say, no, there wasn't a lost week. It was invented by the police. And just the opposite is true. You have detective after detective after detective. Harry Hansen testifying in front of the grand jury. Jack Donahoe, head of homicide, same thing. It's incredible that she disappeared. We don't know where she went. They never figured out where she was. So yeah, Manley was thoroughly checked out. He was investigated. He was eventually given, polygraph, which is not admissible in court for probably good reasons. They eventually gave him sodium pentothal, and he was totally clear. No, not at all. Let's see here. Getting down to, okay, Leslie Dillon. It has been reported, by who? That in a police interview when asked about Elizabeth Short's rose tattoo, he responded, blah, blah, blah. Okay, no, he didn't say that. One of the key questions in the Black Dahlia case was, did Elizabeth Short have a tattoo? Yes, she did. And what became of that? And it's in Boxie. It's in here. If you read thoroughly, which I recommend, you will see that Leslie Dillon said, "Well, I would have flushed it down the toilet." That was his answer. So he flunked. He did not give the correct answer at all. And I don't know I don't know the origin of that information, but it is not correct. I hope it isn't from P. Wheatwell, because that is just a flat out lie. Okay. Did Elizabeth Short make a phone call inside the Biltmore before she disappeared? They thought maybe. They weren't sure. The most that they could nail down was, and remember, they went to the Biltmore staff like 2 weeks later. She was dropped off on January 9th, and she wasn't found till January 15th. And it was a few more days before they identified her and figured out that she had been at the Biltmore. So it's almost 2 weeks. So people are going back almost 2 weeks in their memory and saying, "Oh well, yeah, I remember this." Harry Hansen was pretty dismissive of what people remembered at the Biltmore. They certainly thought that they saw her go toward the telephones. Maybe they saw her making a phone call. It was never determined. They never clinched it positively. There was certainly Mark Hansen was grilled. Did she call you from the Biltmore? He said no. I think she sent a telegram, a wire, to Mark Hansen before leaving San Diego. But once after that, no. And Red Manley was asked when he drove her back from San Diego, did you see her make any phone calls? No. Now remember, Red Manley was stopping at all these water companies and making sales calls. So he wasn't with her all the time. She could have made a phone call on the way up to LA and he didn't know. But, at that point, Elizabeth Short had very little money. And so did she make any phone calls? Nobody really could clinch it that she was. And the same thing with the Biltmore. They don't know. Are there any photos in the police file? Yes, of course. She got away from Glatman. Okay, thank you. Shipping containers. Jennifer, the setup in the story is that this is in the waiting. It's a shipping container from the 1960s, and the setup is that it's this old kind of abandoned factory that had been used by Ford Motor Company for manufacturing manufacturing pieces because they used to assemble cars out here on the West Coast. Ford, Chevy, they all did. And it's like, okay, this disused building, and there are old shipping containers in there. And supposedly this guy from the 60s had did it. And I should point out one more thing coming back to that, which I forgot to mention. The guy who supposedly killed Elizabeth Short, first of all, they turned it into a serial killing. No, Black Dahlia is one of a kind. I'm telling you, I've been studying the morgue photos. That killing is one of a kind. There's nothing like it. But the age of the individual was 23. And that's really young. When I interviewed John Douglas about the Black Dahlia case years ago, he said, this is not a youthful offender. This is an older guy's crime. You are not, youthful offenders don't do this. So having a 23-year-old guy do it and then become a serial killer, but change his style is like, I don't think so. Let's see. Okay. Another question. Do I think Robert Manley was involved in Elizabeth Short's murder? No, I do not. He was totally cleared. No. Let's see. What's your opinion of Mary Pacios? Oh, sorry. What became of Red Manley after he was cleared? Yeah, the internet is not a good place to do research. There was a rumor that he died in a mental institution. He did not. He actually died, I forget the year. I've got his death certificate. Red Manley was not in great health in later years. And he was taking blood thinner. And if you're familiar with that, what blood thinner does, it thins your blood so you don't have a stroke. So he was taking blood thinner and he fell. Okay, what happens if you fall and you're taking blood thinner? You bleed. And so Red Manley was living down in Orange County. He fell. He was taking blood thinner. And he basically sat in a chair and bled to death. And he wasn't found for a couple of days. A family relative found him after a couple of days doing a welfare check. So he didn't die in a mental institution. His wife stayed with him. It is often rumored that his wife left him for like a sheriff's deputy. No, she stuck it out. Okay. Let's see. Okay, there's another question on the Lost Week. What did she do on the Lost Week? I don't know. It is impossible to know that. I really haven't any idea, and I think it's because I'm a nonfiction kind of guy. I refuse to speculate on what happened. To me, the main thing is that Elizabeth Short was somebody who could disappear for a week and nobody would notice. And that's the tragedy of Elizabeth Short, is that she was so disconnected from society that she didn't have all she had was the clothes on her back, a borrowed coat she borrowed from her roommate, the stuff in her purse, maybe $1, and that's it. And she got lost somewhere in the city of LA, and nobody knows where she went. Now, I will point out, as I do, one of the main witnesses, the rebuttal witnesses, say, "Oh yeah," is a policewoman named Merle McBride. Merle McBride has trotted out and said, "Well, she was working a bar or a bus station near a bar, and this woman came up to her and said she needed help from her jealous boyfriend, blah, blah, blah." And Merle McBride identified this woman as Elizabeth Short. Okay. That identification was based on a verbal description. And newspaper accounts show that when they showed, because remember, they didn't have a photograph of Elizabeth Short at that time. When they actually got her famous, iconic mugshot from Santa Barbara and showed it to Merle McBride, it's like, oh, well, maybe that wasn't her. She walked it back. Nobody says that. No one will tell you that. But that's the reality. Let's see. What's my opinion on Mary Pacios? I like Mary personally. I consider her a friend, but some of the things she says are just absolutely impossible. Could not have happened. No. So, I mean, I don't like her, but some of the things Mary Pacios says, they're impossible. That it could not be that way. And I won't get into it beyond that. It's like, no, that's just not possible. Let's see here. Let me go through one of, I had somebody who sent me a long statement, and basically it boils down to, wasn't Elizabeth Short pregnant, and didn't she go to get an abortion? It's like, no. The medical exam says no signs of pregnancy. People want to turn it into a botched abortion. It's not. No. Let go of that. No. Just not. Okay. Let's see. One theory I've heard is that the killer was a cop who had worked as a butcher at one time. Do I know anything about that theory? No, I do not. And no, I don't want to know about it. I will just point out this. A human being is not built the same as an animal. And if you are really curious about it, I suggest that you go to YouTube and watch countless videos of men, they are generally men, butchering game animals, a pig or a cow or a deer, stuff like that. And see how they do that. They're good at it. They know the anatomy of a cow. They know where to cut a cow. They know where to cut up a deer. They know how to break down a pig. Yeah. But a human being isn't built like that at all. And so that knowledge really doesn't transfer all that well. Elizabeth Short was killed by somebody who specifically knew human anatomy. And I have been, as I said, I've been looking at the morgue shots, the morgue photos, and I guarantee you that is somebody who knew human anatomy, knew exactly what he was doing. So was it a butcher? No, I don't think that at all. Yeah, Jennifer, I answered that question. No, Leslie Dillon gave the wrong answer. he didn't know. It's in Boxie. It's in the grand jury testimony that he flunked that test. And I don't know where you got the information. I hope it wasn't P. Wheatwell, but no. Which fiction novel author has the most accurate details of the Black Dahlia murder? None of them. None of them do. They all, the novels in general, the fictional treatment of the Black Dahlia case is generally, it's just fuel to keep the story going. Very little to do with Elizabeth Short or who she was. It's all about, and generally the way the story is told is her body is discovered and the story is told in flashback. Certainly not Elroy's novel. She's not making porn movies or whatever. In the True Confessions, it's kind of like it's kind of like the Black Dahlia case. John Gregory Dunn, to his defense, he doesn't call it the Black Dahlia case. He calls it I think it's the Virgin Tramp or something like that. So he just borrows elements of that rather than outright. I have the Max Allan Collins book. I've never read it. It's just I don't have any desire to read it. If I ever do, I've got a copy of it. I just never read it. Okay. Wasn't police headquarters in the old city hall? Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Robbery homicide, of course, moved to Parker Center, which is where robbery homicide was when I was doing my research in the 1990s. And in fact, when you go into City Hall and ask the police officers on security, where was the old police headquarters? They don't know. I've done that. I said, where was police headquarters in the 1940s? And they will tell you it was Parker Center. They don't know. The kind of depth of knowledge of LAPD history is something apparently they don't cover when they go through the academy. Okay. Let's see. I've got Instagram. I'm going to have to say goodbye to you. Instagram, it's been fun. Goodbye. Okay. All right. Let's see. Yeah, okay, I'm going to skip that one. Okay, what originally brought Walter Bailey to my attention? Okay, I'll try to cover this fast. I mentioned a guy named Kyle Wood, who was a Black Dahlia enthusiast. And back in 1996, he sent me a bunch of material on the Black Dahlia case. He sent me a copy of the coroner's inquest. He sent me various newspaper clippings. He sent me his homemade video documentary. It's called Medford Girl. He has since transferred it to DVD and sells it on eBay, I think. I haven't heard from Kyle Wood in a long, long time. Anyway, one of the things he had was this marriage certificate of Virginia Short and Adrian West. And I thought that, well, that was kind of a weird thing to find. But anyway, so there was, I was going through that document, and I like to visit places that are mentioned in relation to the Black Dahlia. I have been to almost all of them, and I say if you want to see the world, go visit Black Dahlia locations. It'll take you to Florida, Boston, Los Angeles, Oakland. I mean, yeah, it takes you around. Anyway, but I wanted to visit this place where, remember I said I wanted to write, I need to write the chapter about Virginia Short and Adrian West. Well, they got married in Inglewood. And one of the witnesses to the marriage had an address that looked like 3900, something in the block of Norton Avenue. Now, it was a multi-generation photocopy, so it was hard to read. So I ordered a fresh copy of that. And indeed, it was someone who signed as the witness to the marriage of Virginia Short and Adrian West, who lived on Norton Avenue, and it turns out lived a block from the crime scene. And so that was really the genesis of it. It was just absolutely the reverse. I had said all along, anybody who thinks they've solved the Black Dahlia case is a head case. Witness Janice Knowlton. It's like, poor old crazy Janice Knowlton. She was a lot easier. It was a lot easier to make fun of her before she committed suicide. Very, very sad. Very, very sad. Glasgow Smile. Okay, let me say this. The Glasgow Smile is from Wikipedia. Okay, that's not a Glasgow Smile. Glasgow Smile did not exist in 1947. What was her mouth slashed while she was alive? And let me I will just stop here. Was Elizabeth Short alive? Yeah. Was she conscious? Probably not. Because as I said, I've been going over the morgue photos, and she had been struck really, really hard a couple of times in the forehead. And according to one of the original detectives, any of those blows along her forehead would have knocked her out. So I would at least like to think that, was she alive in terms of, was the heart pumping? Yeah. But was she conscious? I don't think so. I would like to think so. Anyway, but the whole Glasgow Smile thing is from Wikipedia. You cannot imagine. Wikipedia is the vector for so much crapola. A recent TV show that claimed he didn't. No, Dylan absolutely did not know about the tattoo. It is in here. Whoever said that is absolutely lying. Was Walter Bailey ever investigated by the police? No. Well, that's our hour, and thank you everybody for showing up. The time, at least for me, has gone quickly. I hope it's gone quickly for you. I will do the next one. God, it's December. The next one is in, what did I say? December 3rd. December 3rd. Okay. So next Dahlia chat is on December 3rd. George Hodel is on November 19th, 2 weeks from today. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So I will talk to you then. In the meantime, have a good couple of weeks. And if you haven't voted, vote. If you are able to, if you're in the U.S. and able to vote in the U.S. election, do so. Okay. See you in 2 weeks. Take care.